it here in round 6 against Braun-Duin. For Baugh, 9th in the Player of the Year standings. He is a player who is very close to the Players' Championship in a lot of different ways, both the 2016 Player of the Year and the Season 3 standings. Jacob's got a good record. He's not qualified either of the ways just yet. A good tournament here, though, would change that real quick. So he starts out on Thraben Inspector to Brian's tap land.
Baugh, an Open champion earlier in the year, playing Rally the Ancestors, rather.
Swing for 1 here from Thraben Inspector. We'll go back over to Brian. And we're seeing this a lot out of the blue-white flash deck. Their turn 2s don't have that many solid plays. A lot of times it's Thraben Inspector, crack, clue.
Turn 2 action, Smuggler's Copter is kind of ideal from them. Selfless Spirit, totally reasonable play.
Some sequencing there from Jacob. He actually drew Revolutionary Rebuff off of the clue. But he will Reflector Mage to have Brian pick up the Grim Flare and swing for 1. He puts Brian down to 18.
And rebuffing Grim Flare would be a pretty aggressive use of the card. I imagine even if he had it, he'd be likely to crack the clue anyway. You really just want that to hit Ishkana. The Grim Flare, the Reflector Mage matches up against it positively in more ways than one.
Brian's going to go ahead and traverse for a basic and then cast Transgress the Mind. So we see here a land number 4. It's an island. We see Avacyn, Gideon, and then Selfless Spirit and Revolutionary Rebuff.
So getting Gideon out of this hand and knowing about the rebuff are both significant factors for Brian here. So he'll have to leave Baugh with Avacyn, and on the following turn he can commit the Selfless Spirit to increase his clock and leave up the rebuff.
Yeah, so the Gideon's threatened as early as next turn. That I think would force Brian to take Gideon.
Yeah, the most realistic reason why you would think about leaving the Gideon is if Brian's next turn is Mind Rack Demon.
Okay, right. It
can potentially attack into the Gideon, but even that doesn't line up especially favorably. You know, if Baugh spends his turn making an ally on the following turn pluses it,
it's a lot of damage.
Doesn't match up very well.
And in the end, Brian takes Gideon, so that's going to be exiled. And back over to Baugh.
And another copy of Reflector Mage was the pickup there.
And that could be useful, especially if you're looking at something like Mind Rack Demon as the play.
If it's Demon, even just replaying that Grim Flare.
Well, and Brian knows he's in trouble because you see Jacob playing Selfless Spirit. He's left up mana for Revolutionary Rebuff. That's a card that Brian knows about and has difficulty playing around nonetheless. See 1 artifact in hand, that is Pilgrim's Eye. So if he wants to resolve a spell this turn, he can go for that one.
The Pilgrim's Eye does check the Selfless Spirit.
And may just be the play for that reason. And here we do have Pilgrim's Eye, a card that is safe to the counter spell. Looks like we're pausing here. Now, Jacob can't counter this. The Revolutionary Rebuff counters non-artifact spells. So Brian will get another swamp.
Baugh's deck, you may not be able to see this, but his cards are all foreign. So
okay,
it's possible that he's not 100% clear on the entire text of Revolutionary Rebuff.
It's like Mana Leak, but for 2.
That's the sort of thing that happens when you play cards like that, where they have precedents that are so similar.
A big draw for Jacob. It's another copy of Gideon. And as he's missed his 5th land drop, that's a very welcome card.
Yeah, he wouldn't be able to cast the Avacyn. He would be playing that Gideon, and then BBD would have Ishkana mana, but he doesn't have Delirium, so that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, Transgress and Traverse are the 2 cards in Brian's graveyard. So even if Pilgrim's Eye blocks, he still won't have Delirium. And I guess the question is then, a 3/5 Ishkana, that seems like something that Jacob might be able to beat.
Yes. Yeah, he already has a Reflector Mage in his hand. Not that you would necessarily want to cast that against Ishkana, but
So if you're in Jacob's spot, the Gideon plays there. I'm wondering, if he could emblem it?
the emblem allows him to send in the Selfless Spirit on this turn and also gets in for more damage.
That's going to be the play, a very aggressive line from Jacob, but one that could really pay off. Now there are no good blocks for Brian.
And if Brian has something like Ruinous Path in his hand, this emblem matters a lot more than the Gideon does.
Yeah, it's a swing for 8. Brian taking at least 5. 8 if he wants to chump block. At 15, this is half his life. And I suppose when Jacob's last card is something like Reflector Mage and Rebuff, maybe this damage push is exactly what he needs.
And he's able to get in enough chip shots. He does still have that Avacyn. If he still has a Selfless Spirit, you know, that could automatically trigger the Avacyn just by using its sacrifice ability and punch through for some serious damage.
So Pilgrim's Eye will step in front of the Selfless Spirit. Brian will go down to 10 as we start his 5th turn. Murder the pickup for Brian. Certainly if Brian can go double kill spell here, then that will be, you know, a swing and a miss for Jacob. Brian will play Murder and Grim Flayer. And this means that the Grim Flayer is now a 4/4 thanks to Pilgrim's Eye covering 2 creature types. And a big draw for Jacob. He hits land 5. It's untapped. So now he can Reflector Mage. He will swing for 5, put Brian to 5, and leave up Revolutionary Rebuff. It's going to be hard for Brian to make it through to the next turn.
Yep, there would have been some tension there had Jacob missed that land drop. He would have potentially made himself vulnerable to Ishkana if he cast a Reflector Mage, but here he kind of gets to do everything.
Brian needs to both get rid of 2 creatures and do it through a counterspell. I'm not sure his deck's capable. And Jacob holding on. You're talking earlier about how white-blue Flash needs to be more aggressive in this matchup. Things like Gideon immediately making an emblem may just be the right strategy here for Jacob.
Yeah, it allowed him to push through more damage on that turn. Made it so that he just has some kind of mopey creatures if BBD had something like a Ruinous Path. It's entirely likely that just making allies would be very good in a game like this. Brian does have the Ruinous Path in his hand, so if we just make the ally attack the Selfless Spirit into the Pilgrim's Eye, we just haven't really done very much. So that emblem looked to be the correct play by a pretty wide margin. Yeah, and Brian knows about the rebuff here, so he can't go for anything like Ishkana even if he has it.
Yeah, it's going to be a swing, and that will be game 1 over to Jacob Baugh. So white-blue Flash takes the first game. Gets off to an aggressive start, and thanks to double Reflector Mage, Jacob is able to sneak under Black-Green Delirium. This, you know, that game reminds me a lot. If you played last Standard, the Black-Green, like Tireless Tracker, Sylvan Advocate decks, those certainly existed, and you always felt that the 2 Reflector Mages was always so good against what you're trying to do, and feeling the same thing here watching that game play out.
Yeah, that Grim Flayer was just embarrassing against Reflector Mage. It's not going to be true of every game in this matchup, but certainly that one. That tempo play of the Reflector Mage paid huge dividends.
All right, well, we will look at the sideboards. So for white-blue Flash, this is the card hoarder list that we saw from both Lucas Kiefer and Noah Walker during their match back in round 5. So 2 Blessed Alliance, a negate, 3 Spell Shrivel, an extra Always Watching, a Quarantine Field, a Linvala, 2 Jace, 2 Declaration in Stone, and 2 Fragmentize. I believe the exact same 75 that Noah Walker's on. He went big in the mirror to go big against Delirium.
If you're concerned about the game being about card advantage, Jace is quite good, and I imagine that some percentage of these games will be, though more often than not, the role of Blue-White Flash is going to be to try to play a little bit of controlling. Or rather a tempo game. So I like the Spell Shrivels a good amount. I like those more than the Jaces most likely. So using Spell Shrivel to try to get around Ishkana, that seems more significant. Declaration in Stone can clean up spiders or the 3/5 itself, so I like that one a good amount. But more so than going big, I think that he's just trying to use some finesse here, use these counter spells to stay ahead of Ishkana.
All right, so for Brian, he's going to have a sideboard of his own. 3 Natural State, 2 Deadweight, a Cletus, an Emrakul, 2 Pick the Brain, 2 Transgress the Mind, an Obnixilis, and 2 To the Slaughter. When Brad Nelson played the matchup, we saw him lower his curve. Cards like Deadweight, obviously, I think would want to come in here. But I'm not seeing too many tools on Brian's side.
No, there's not a ton going on here. I do like Transgress the Mind. We saw in that game it did take a Gideon, and Baugh had a backup Gideon. That was bad news. But Transgress the Mind will help him play against this flat strategy more, knowing the hand and diminishing that information advantage allows you to play the game much more proactively without fear and hedge better. To the Slaughter is reasonable against this deck. If you're able to keep the board clear, you can use it as a good interactive spell against Gideon. Also, given that this deck is very good at achieving Delirium, it should generally be able to get the Planeswalker no matter what.
So we go to extra removal spells, which is frequently the plan when you're playing these like black-green mid-range style decks against some sort of creature strategy. They're going to get ready for game number 2. Now, you may notice that Standard has gone a while without rotation, and that's because, or a new set, it's because we wait until after the holidays for the next set, but that set is Aether Revolt. So the Aether Revolt pre-release is around the corner. It's going to be January 14th through 15th. Now, Star City Games has a store kit for you. We see it's featuring exclusive art by our own creature collection artist. You can see this coming up for this, and we are giving away the parody of Chandra. This is Pandranolar. You see, of course, your favorite animal from Kaladesh leading the charge. Those will be available at all participating stores in the pre-release, but you're going to want to sign up. This is your last chance to get these in your store, so make sure you sign up this week. StarCityGames.com/pre-release is where you'd go, and if you're a store wanting to figure out how to sign up, contact ISP, that's In-Store Programs, at StarCityGames.com.
Those goggles are sweet.
I forgot, was she wearing them?
Yes. Pandranolar had some really sweet goggles. She wasn't wearing them because she didn't want to hide her scary, glowing eyes.
Goggles are decorative, from what I can tell, in Magic art. They
you,
don't generally put them on.
They give you +1/+2. They're weapons.
If you're an inventor?
Yeah.
They're especially good for artificers. But Chandra's not an artificer. She's Planeswalker.
Planeswalking is more of a hobby.
Okay.
Not really a job.
She'd be more of a pyromancer's goggles.
You can't pay the bills by planeswalking.
Brian on the play here has kept. And for Jacob, a close one. Yeah, but he will keep. We are underway. The first game, Evolving Wilds, starting for Brian. And like last game, there's some early pressure from Jacob. He has the turn 1 Thraben Inspector. We'll see if he has an actual 2-drop to follow it up. Last game, his turn 2 play was just cracking the clue. On the play, it seems like that was fine. On the draw, I wonder if that will be fast enough. He may really rely on a card like Smuggler's Copter.
Yeah, you'd want to have the Copter or Selfless Spirit. You would not want to have Selfless Spirit if BBD is just going to play a Liliana on turn 3, for example.
Sure, that's all the X1s, especially stuff like Selfless Spirit, are scary in the face of that card.
Looks like Jacob has a lot of his big stuff. I think Gideon and Avacyn both in hand.
A swing from Thraben Inspector and then just a pass, so it'll be grapple with the past for Brian. Increasing his delirium here as we go. So, Transgress, Liliana, and a Forest all put into the graveyard. So this means he'll have Sorcery, Instant, Planeswalker, Land, full delirium. So he picks up that Forest. And we'll just continue on with mana sources. Looks like Natural State brought in by Brian. Can hit both Smuggler's Copter and Stasis Snare out of Jacob's deck. if Jacob's brought in the quarantine field. It's an excellent answer there, too.
Given that before Ishkana, BBD's not good at blocking flyers, I do like having that answer to Smuggler's Copter.
See, Brian just passes the turn, so Jacob will go ahead and crack a clue. And then another grapple from Brian, playing around a card like Revolutionary Rebuff. He'll get Grim Flayer back. Still at 4 card types. We go to Jacob's third turn. Plays to me a third port town for Baugh. Now tripling up on the white-blue duel.
Still has planes in his hand.
Yes, same one been shown 3 times. It will be Thraben Inspector as an attack, and then just another Thraben Inspector for Baugh. So as much as I think this deck is similar, is the same Delver-style strategy, when your Delvers are Thraben Inspectors, it's a lot grindier.
Delver Secrets never drew a card, though, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Grim Flayer will be the play by Brian, and Jacob will crack the clue.
And Reflector Mage is also not Geist of St. Traft.
No, but that deck might have played Reflector Mage if it was legal.
Yeah, probably would have.
I don't know if they would have played Thraben Inspector.
No.
No.
No, they would not have played Thraben Inspector.
It's no Snapcaster Mage. How's that? How's that? So, Jacob now playing land 4. The Grim Flayer on Brian's side's already a 4-4. A third Thraben Inspector from Jacob. Is he gonna, and just a pass, not even gonna play the Reflector Mage just yet.
He really doesn't want Brian to cast Ishkana this turn.
Ooh, Brian will just attack with the 4-4 then. Yeah, Jacob takes the damage. He goes to 16. Top 3 from Brian. And game of cat and mouse then. If Jacob's actually going to leave up counter spells for Ishkana the entire game. Certainly if he were to tap out, Brian would slam one.
Yes. And Brian can't just attack with Grim Flayer and do nothing. I mean, he could. He is technically winning the race. But just attacking and getting cracked back for 3 is not the best course of action. You know, Jacob could do something like flash in an Avacyn on one of these turns, or even spell Quellers aggressively and really turn that around. So I expect him to do something with his mana here.
If it looks right now like Brian's winning the race, that's probably not going to keep being true. Brian's just going to play Ishkana. He's going to challenge Jacob to have the counter spell, and Jacob does. Spell Shrivel will exile the legendary spider.
And now, question is, does Baugh have another counter? Given that Brian just ran that Ishkana out.
You think he has another?
Well, if Baugh has another counter, he'll want to leave it up. But if he has a proactive spell, he just cast it, because Brian's not going to not just cast Ishkana again.
In Jacob's spot, how strong is your read that Brian just has another Ishkana?
I'm going to play as if he has it. It's convincing.
Pretty high.
Yeah. Either that or a very fast and clear line to Emrakul.
Yeah, I mean, it's that thing where you can count out the turns where if you say, I have Emrakul in 2 turns and 2 Ishkanas, then you're like, well, I will just play one every turn.
Yep.
And if they counter them, so be it. A swing for 3 from Jacob.
I believe that Baugh, he has options. He could have Gideon or Avacyn here.
Reflector Mage puts Grim Flayer back into Brian's hand. He will pass. He's left up 2 mana, so the possibility of Revolutionary Rebuff.
Interesting thing here, with Gideon in hand, if Brian just has Ishkana, Gideon Emblem, makes it so Baugh's attack on the following turn isn't even that bad.
He doesn't get much through, but Brian would lose a lot of the spiders. And I like your Emrakul count. You see Brian's going to make another Ishkana, see if Jacob has the counter. He does not. 5 lands in play and 5 card types in the graveyard. So it might just be the case, make that 6 lands in play, that Brian has plays all the way up the chain to Emrakul. He's only 2 mana sources away.
Yeah, so he just has everything that Baugh could be concerned about.
Baugh drew a card off the clue on end step there, hoping to find something like a Declaration in stone.
I do actually believe he has Declaration. I think I spotted that earlier.
And then, I believe, just drew Revolutionary Rebuff.
All right, so this could be a good turn of events.
I mean, certainly Brian's not respecting the counterspell anymore.
No.
Not after the spider resolves.
Not rebuff specifically, certainly.
Land 6 for Jacob. Enough mana for Rebuff and Gideon. He also has Avacyn in hand and a pair of lands. But the wall of spiders has been assembled from Brian, so he's going to have to break through them. We'll see which direction he wants to go with it.
So, Baugh. If he has Declaration, you have to ask yourself, would you rather clear all the spiders or the 3/5?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. It is Declaration in Stone, and it will be the spider tokens. This means if he wants to leave up that counterspell, he can't do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a copter in his hand, and that might explain why he was hesitant to attack. And it's going to be everyone now. Ishkana goes in front of the Reflector Mage. Brian down to 12. So throws away the Reflector Mage for 3 damage, plays Smuggler's Copter. But that spider, it can block Smuggler's Copter as well.
Mm-hmm.
Natural State on the end step for Brian. Takes care of the Smuggler's Copter. If he draws a 7th land, Rebuff would not counter any of his 5s. We'll see what he has here.
It looks like BBD indeed has land here.
Yeah, so 6 lands in play, 5 card types in the graveyard, 2 off of Emrakul. It would still be rebuffed even if he had it. 12 life points for Baugh, or for Brian, 16 for Baugh. Brian's gonna try to even that up some. Swings for 3, it's now 13-12. Plays a 7th land on 5 mana. It's gonna be a 3rd Ishkana, just ready to Legend to rule away the other one and get 3 spiders back.
Yep, and that's all the Ishkanas.
And a Grimflare. Yeah, there's actually only 3 in his list, so. And Jacob will rebuff the Grimflare. 1 card left in Brian's hand. Avacyn Island in Jacob's hand, and a big draw here. It's Jace.
So he has his pick of 5-drop here. Avacyn doesn't match up exceptionally against Ishkana, which is not to say that Jace does, but generating some card advantage would be a good start here. See
how Jacob with these Thraben Inspectors in a way played his own Ishkana. He's got his trio of spiders. Jace will scry to the bottom and draw, go up to 6 loyalty. One thing about this Jace is he's pretty loyal. He doesn't mind getting hit by a spider as long as it's not too often. And a swing of all 4 spiders at the Planeswalker from Brian. 2 cards left in hand. Leave both lands. So Jacob will take the free double block on this to kill a spider, and then chump block the Ishkana. So Jacob loses an Inspector, and Brian loses a spider. A swing of an activation deals 4 life points worth of damage to Jacob. He loses 4, goes to 9. Jace down to 4. Brian plays another tap land and passes. His last card's a 9th land. And right now, Jacob just has more late game. Avacyn in hand, land in hand.
So the last turn he scryed a land to the bottom and found a land, but it doesn't take too much to push this Avacyn from being okay into a winning position. If you can get this 3/5 spider off the table, that'd be huge.
The Unraveler draws a card. The card appears to be Stasis Snare.
And he has the mana to Stasis Snare and Avacyn.
Yeah, 9 mana. That looks great. And now Brian's got to hope to find Emrakul. Does only play 1 copy, so not easy. Transgress the Mind will be the play from Brian. That should force the Avacyn out of Baugh's hand.
Yep. This will prevent Brian from walking into a bad combat. But it's not going to hit anything with his Transgress.
So the Archangel Avacyn will flash onto the battlefield. 4/4 Vigilance Flyer, making Jacob's creatures indestructible until end of turn. That will put a stop to any sort of attacks Brian might have. Brian will attempt, the Transgress will resolve, and we'll see Jacob's hand. There's the Stasis Snare there too, so Jacob just has to play everything. Stasis Snare and Spell Shrivel are the two cards. Rather than play one and let Brian get the other, it looks like Jacob is content to let Brian pick.
Yeah, Jacob says both these cards are good. Given my position, I can probably save one of these for Emrakul. Don't really need to Stasis Snare right now.
Yeah, okay, so he's saying rather than trying to kill the Ishkana, they both kill Emrakul, and he's just going to hang on to them both for that reason.
Yep.
There are 6 cards in Brian's graveyard. He now plays land number 9. He still needs 2 more lands to play a Spell Shrivel proof Emrakul. Draw for Jacob. Brian empty-handed.
I think it's another Jace that Jacob picked up.
Well, the Jace has been really good on this board. I think the difficulty with that draw is I'm not sure the one he has in play is dying anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. He could aggressively bounce the spiders. Doesn't really accomplish much, though. Though once you get them out of the way, you can start attacking with the Thraben Inspectors, and Brian can't block them with the Ishkana, because that'll just force the Avacyn to flip, and suddenly that can just attack into whatever.
Yeah, so there's this interesting thing then where Jacob can decide to start unsummoning spiders.
There's actually a reasonable argument for Unsummon Spider, Jace Unsummon Spider.
It's very aggressive, yeah.
Well, Brian just has all this mana to just activate his Ishkana, right?
Yes, I think he's debating there's that, or he could also just keep scrying and maybe try to find a Stasis Snare, and if he does, then it's easier from here.
Mm-hmm. Seeing as Brian just has he doesn't really have cards in his hand to do anything.
Yeah.
I like this aggressive line with the tools that he has available.
And I actually like this because Brian, you see draining for 3, Jacob down to 6. Jacob probably has to make this play.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot about the second ability there of Ishkana, but it's no joke here.
Yeah.
And now Jacob deciding if he wants to play another Jace. I guess I think so. Yeah. Let's sign me up.
Mm-hmm. And here, I would expect Jacob to attack with at least one Thraben Inspector after bouncing the Spider token. And then the Avacyn attack is just free.
The second Unraveler also unsummons a Spider. Yeah, you might want to leave back one Inspector in case Brian draws a kill spell.
Right.
That seems wise. No attacks at all. He'll just pass. So a defensive play by the Jaces there. Grim Flare is the draw for Brian. In that he was getting rid of the spiders so that he wouldn't get burned out.
Mm-hmm.
But he hasn't really found a way to go forward yet. Draws for the turn. Jace will go back to drawing him cards. Scry 1 and draw. That's a plus. The last draw for Jacob was a land. He draws and keeps this one. It is a copy of Declaration in Stone, so he will declare away the Ishkana. A clue for Brian.
Right. Now, for sure can attack with Avacyn. Probably just leave back the Inspectors to soak up some damage here.
Yeah, he's going to attack, and now Brian will crack a clue in response. Keep in mind, there's at least one hissing Quagmire there for Brian, so you got to count Jacob's life points at the moment.
Yep.
He is at 6, Brian's at 8.
And that Spell Shrivel, it's only covering Emrakul here.
Yeah, it's...
I guess it is still technically covering Noxious Gearhulk. 9 lands in play for Brian.
Yeah, so one land lets him play a Shrivel-proof Gearhulk, and a second one lets him play a Shrivel-proof Emrakul. So Brian Braun-Duin will start with Grasp of Darkness on Avacyn. A big play.
Can't Spell Shrivel that one effectively.
He can spell shrivel. Yeah, at this point, we said the only 2 cards that counterspell really tags are the Gear Hulk and the Emrakul. So this is just going to work.
If he shrivels, it takes Brian off of mana to activate his Quagmire for the turn. Given that he's on 6, so this is perhaps a consideration.
Okay, he's going to make the play. Brian pays, so no creature land. Then Avison goes to the graveyard. A swing weapon from Brian. Jacob's going to have to decide on whether or not he's putting both creatures in front. That's the only way to deny Brian the trigger on Grim Flayer damage. And I feel that if he gives him that trigger, remember we're looking at Grapple, Traverse, Emrakul, there's just, that's a scary one to do.
And now he's out that spell shrivel, so Emrakul is a big deal.
Yeah, this attack is not going at Jace, it's going at Jacob. And Jacob will take it, go to 2. So decides to keep his creatures around, but now Brian gets to look at the top 3 and set it up, and there is an Emrakul, the Promised End, in the top 3. Pretty straightforward. Brian's going to put it on top of the deck.
Yep, I recommend putting it there. Also gets to get rid of some bad draws too, as we see Forest hit the graveyard. But for Jacob, just chump blocking with the Favorite Inspectors, it puts him in a spot that is also pretty terrible. He would just have the Jace and the Plains in his hand.
All right, so Brian's kept 2 on top, put a Forest into the graveyard. We're back to Jacob Baugh. Draws another Plains. His hand is double Plains.
Now from here, time is starting to become concerning. So we're getting down to 18 minutes.
A Scry by the Jace. Scries to the bottom and draws. Looks like we might have seen a Stasis Snare. Okay. He'll pass the turn. Go back over to Brian Braun-Duin.
Now, Snare would take Emrakul off the table, but he's still in trouble with regard to this Grim Flayer.
Remember, there is that another natural state in Brian's hand, so if it is Stasis Snare, Brian will have the answer.
Okay. Yeah, so this looks to be all wrapped up for Brian.
Well, right now, Brian just has, if he activates Quagmire and swings, it does force the Stasis Snare. Now, it does mean if that works, that Brian may not be able to Emrakul this turn.
As a reminder, players, we are also taking sign-ups for tomorrow morning's Modern and Legacy Classic.
So now, Brian, you see, what he's deciding between is whether or not it's safer to Emrakul or to activate the Quagmire. Both are strong plays, but
if Jacob had something like another Spell Shrivel, that would make the Emrakul line pretty bad. Given that it's Stasis Snare, both of his lines seem great.
So the Grim Flayer swings at Jacob. No hissing Quagmire. The read from Jacob here has got to be that there's an Emrakul in Brian's hand. It really can't be anything else. Noxious Gear Hulk here doesn't even make sense.
Right. He would just use that to kill one of the Inspectors before his attack.
Exactly. So if you know Emrakul's coming, and Jacob does, he double blocks. Makes sense. Here's Emrakul, the Promised End from Brian. Trigger will happen. Trigger on. It's going to be a Stasis Snare, but Brian will get Jacob's next turn. All right, so a draw. It's another land. Brian might just do nothing. There's not much damage he can do with the Jace, I don't think.
There's no single card that he can draw that could really sabotage Jacob with. You don't really want a -2 to bounce your Grim Flayer. Maybe Brian uses the natural state and then uses the Jace to bounce the Emrakul, but that seems pretty insignificant.
And I guess at the current board, it's not over then. Jace can unsummon Grim Flayer. It's a Gideon is the draw by Jacob, so he can make an ally, unsummon Grim Flayer. He's got Hissing Quagmire covered, things might be okay for Baugh. That's what he's going to do. Okay, so he's still alive. Here's Gideon. Makes us a knight. Now keep in mind, when Brian had that activation not long ago, well, first of all, Natural State's just going to win the game, so we're going to go to 3. I was going to say Brian had that top card of his next draw was known and something he decided to keep.
Yeah.
But Natural State makes it easy there. Emrakul, she'll swing back next turn for lethal.
Right. 13 greater than 2. Checks out.
So players are going to hurriedly are going to go back to their sideboard pretty quick here. 15 minutes remaining in the round. That is the match timer. So they're going to want to get underway on this one pretty quickly. You see neither of them re-sideboarding much for this match.
This seems like a matchup where the roles are pretty clearly defined. Play draw doesn't really matter. It impacts play patterns more than the cards that you want.
That much makes sense. So as we reach the end of Season 3 here, this is our last Open in Season 3. 2 weeks later in Atlanta, we have our Invitational to cap off the year, and we start Season 1 of next year. That's the Atlanta Invitational. And Open in the same weekend. Now, we have announced 2017's schedule. So if you want to head over to our website, you can see all the places we'll be traveling next year, but we're going to run through it with you. Next year, we're switching to a 2-season format. So we have our June and December invitationals. So this one is Season 1. It leads all the way up to the June one. So we have two or 3 shows every month, which you can make it out to. We have, in January, we'll have Standard in Columbus and Standard in Richmond before the following weekend, our Modern Regional Championships. Then at the end of February, we have our first ever Team Unified Open. This is going to be in Baltimore. So you and 2 friends can show up. It's in Modern. It's the same format. And the one catch, it's in 3 different constructed formats. So you have a Modern player, a Legacy player, and a Standard player. And you face off against someone in the corresponding format. Then we finish the month in Indianapolis for a Modern Open. After that, 2 weeks later, we go to Dallas for a Modern Open. We make it back to Worcester for our Legacy Open of the season. So we have 2 chances to play Legacy. You have the team event and the Legacy Open. Finishing with Standard in Atlanta. Then in May, we have our Standard and Modern Opens in Louisville and Baltimore before finishing the season with our Modern Open, June 10th and 11th, and our Season 1 Invitational. That's June 30th through July 2nd, Modern and Standard, the Season 1 Invitational weekend.
That Baltimore Open's mighty inviting. I've always wanted to play a Standard Modern Legacy team tournament.
Sure.
Baltimore is not the most accessible city from Minneapolis.
Oh, no, it's great. It's great. You can get there. The flights are great.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. I might have to check that out.
Which seed are you playing?
I would probably be Modern at this point in my life. I think if you asked me 3-4 years ago, I would snap off Legacy and not think twice about it.
Now we're on to Modern?
I think it's Modern for me now.
Game 3 underway. Jacob on the start. 3rd game in a row starts with Thraben Inspector. Brian with Hissing Quagmire. For both games, Jacob has started on a swing and a clue crack. See if he changes his strategy at all. It's going to be an attack for 1, and not this time. He's going to go ahead and pass. So does Brian with the Grim Flayer and Jacob with the card draw. We've been here before. Jacob's 3rd turn. Again, it looks like he draws his revolutionary rebuff a turn too late. He did that in game 1 as well. We pass back to Brian. No turn 3 play from Baugh. Brian will swing with Grimflayer, the 2/2, looking to get by, and it is just Stasis Snare going to take care of the creature. And a pass from Brian. No plays. Back over to Baugh. Draws 4th land. He does have Gideon at the ready. And since he's on the play, this is where play draw seems to matter. He swings for 1 with the Inspector. He doesn't have to worry about Ishkana yet.
Nope. Being able to curve Gideon into leaving up rebuff is very powerful. The attack with the Thraben Inspector there just checked Brian for Natural State. Didn't appear that he had it.
So then he goes and makes the Knight Ally. Go back to Brian. He actually just had no plays on 3 mana. He will ruin his path away the Planeswalker. So Jacob left with a 1/2, and a 2/2. So you go back to his turn, he draws. And Jacob's hand just continues to make better and better. You see him play land 5, swing for 3, put Brian down to 15. At 5 mana, he has the 3 cards in his hand he has are Avacyn on 5, and he has Rebuff Spell Queller.
Yeah, this hand is excellent, and Brian just does not have anything on the table yet. He has a Hissing Quagmire, and that's the best thing he has going for him currently.
Yeah, a lot of cards on Brian's side, so you have to be careful if you're Jacob Baugh. It's going to be an end-step Avacyn from Jacob, and Brian will cast Murder on it. So the Angel is down, no harm, no foul. Back over to Jacob's turn. Draws another Stasis Snare.
Another excellent draw.
Yeah, a swing for 3 puts Brian down to 12. This is really helpful in case Brian draws something like Natural State to free up the blocker. And just a go. So 2 counter spells and a kill spell in Baugh's hand. Brian plays land 6 and passes. Is Baugh going to do anything? He's thinking about putting Spell Queller into play, but I don't know if he's going to do it. Yeah, it just untaps. But there is Quagmire mana up, so it'll be interesting to see if the Thraben Inspector keeps attacking, and it will. So Brian, sure, he'll activate a creature, and Stasis Snare from Baugh will go ahead and hit it.
And given that Baugh still has Rebuff and Spell Queller, that Stasis Snare is not doing too much else.
Still, Grasp of Darkness will take care of the Knight. Does Baugh rebuff here? He can. Does he Spell Quill here? Either way, he's taking down his counter spells.
Yeah, currently, BBD just has instant sorcery as card types in his graveyard, so being shielded down against Ishkana isn't terrible.
Yeah, I almost want to see the counter there because now it's only 1 damage coming across on Brian. Jacob's clock's gone.
Right. Yeah, I would have been very tempted to rebuff there.
Noxious Gear Hulk from Brian. Guess what? That one's an artifact.
Yeah.
He doesn't have an answer to it.
Gross.
You cannot revolutionary rebuff the Gear Hulk. Huge play for Brian. Now, Jacob does have the answer in hand. He has a Declaration in stone. You see Jacob end step, ends up spell quelling anyway.
Yep, just has to get a clock on the battlefield.
Right. So he has the 2/3. He's going to have to declare away the Noxious Gear Hulk. And attack for 2. Brian down to 11. But the clock on Jacob's side isn't moving very quickly.
No.
And that counterspell, while good in this matchup, gets bad fast. Brian cracks a clue, draws a land. It's Hissing Quagmire, plays land 7, passes. His graveyard just has 2 spell types in it, so we're not close to Emrakul. Spell Queller hits Brian down to 9. Can Brian hit something? He looks like he has a copy of To the Slaughter. That'll play.
Yep, that will clean up Spell Queller. It also, well, doesn't have Delirium just yet, so it would not be great against the top deck Gideon anyway, but cleans up the Spell Queller.
Upkeep To the Slaughter from Brian. Spell Queller will be down. Jacob now draws the card. It is a basic land. Land 7 and just a pass from Jacob. Nothing more. No threat. So Brian down to 9, but he has stopped the bleeding so far. Now can he turn the corner? Just 2 cards in hand. Not much threats. It looks like he may just have a creature land. We'll make it a Mindrak Demon. And with so many lands in play, we just aren't playing. This Revolutionary Buff, I think, is left without a home.
Brian did just find his Delirium.
Yeah, creature and land added to the graveyard. So I guess there was a risk there on Brian's side. If he had not hit Delirium on those 4 cards, he would be losing the race to himself.
Yeah.
Reflector Mage, there's a threat from Jacob. It puts the demon back into Brian's hand. Jacob plays another land and we pass, but Jacob's running out of gas here. He's just got Stasis Snare and Revolutionary Rebuff left, nothing else. Brian plays a land, passes, but he does have another Hissing Quagmire up. Attacks are not yet free for Jacob as he draws another land.
And as this game progresses more and more, Jacob's in a pretty bad position. His deck doesn't have any reach. It has some great cards, but Brian's building up towards Emrakul, top decking Ishkana, things like that. Whereas Jacob could maybe pick up a Gideon or an Avacyn. Brian has some pretty good ways to have those cards covered.
Yeah, there's nothing like, you know, a Gear Hulk or a Sphinx's Revelation or something like that that gets him through here. Mindrak Demon mills 4 more from Brian. Same creature types as before. But he still has Delirium, still not taking damage off the demon, and Jacob just lands and another Spell Snare. He's going to have to snare away the demon, maybe not just yet, so he'll pass. He may take some hits off Mindrak Demon.
Yeah, he's at 20 yet.
Brian, he's swinging for 4. You see, he's still leaving back that last. Maybe he doesn't have another creature land. Yeah, no more creature lands on Brian's side. It's just mana. To be fair, just mana is what Jacob's looking at, too. Land 10 and pass for him. Brian draws Grasp of Darkness, hits Jacob again. Jacob takes a second hit off it. We'll see just when he pulls the trigger on the Grasp. Another land from Brian. Can Jacob find a threat? It is Thraben Inspector. Okay, that's a redraw. He'll get a clue. He'll crack it. Just over 5 minutes left in the round for the players.
5 additional turns. Again, Magic players, that is time in round number 7.
And can he hit an additional threat off the Inspector? Its life totals are 12 and 9 right now. Land and the draw here from Jacob. Okay, it looks like that redraw was Jace Unraveler of Secrets, and that's going to be a big one. He'll cast Jace. And he'll just start scrying and drawing. That spell snare in his hand, that's just happening.
Yep. Yeah, he has the stasis snare to get this demon covered, and he just needs to draw into ways to pull ahead and hope that BBD does not get an Emrakul or an Ishkana online.
A swing with Mind Rack Demon at Jace. I wonder if Jacob will snare. He may just put the Jace down to 2. I mean, is it really so bad? He'll snare. Mind Rack Demon gone. Brian with 2 cards. Jacob completely tapped out. What do we have? It's going to be Grapple with the Past. Okay, that will play. Is there an Emrakul in his yard?
We just flipped over some garbage there, and Ishkana's good.
Ishkana's good, especially when you look at the amount of mana Brian has. We now have to start looking at, does he have 4? How close is he to 14? You see 6 tapped there. He's got 4 more in play. So still 3 lands away from double Spider activations, but scary nonetheless. This will end quickly.
Right.
Declaration in Stone off the top from Baugh.
That's excellent.
How good is that? Jace +1, scry to the bottom and draw. He draws on scries a basic to the bottom, gets a basic. All right then.
Getting really flooded on Baugh's side here.
So Declaration will have to hit the spiders.
Yeah,
and they're gone.
Brian had, say, Grasp of Darkness to kill the spider that was targeting a response, that would have been pretty big, but he didn't have anything there.
He did have Grasp in his hand, actually. He'll cast Vessel of Nascency, though.
I suppose he's decided that the Ishkana on its own, the Jace is on 7 loyalty, Baugh's pulling ahead. He really just needs to Emrakul and digs for that.
Off his Vessel, he goes casts Liliana, grabs Liliana. We'll see if he -2s. I imagine he has some good creatures in his graveyard.
Yeah. Plussing doesn't do a lot for him here.
Yeah, I don't think he's going for Emblem right now. He does very least have a Grim Flayer. Yeah, Mind Rack Demon available as well. So first Ishkana is going to attack at Jace. Thraben Inspector goes away. Liliana mills for 3. That's Transgress, Vessel. And mills for 2 then, and he gets back the Flayer and casts it. So we go to Jacob's side. 12 and 9 are life totals. Jacob draws. It's Thraben Inspector, makes a clue, cracks clue, plenty of mana for Baugh, draws Spell Shrivel. Ugh, Shrivel and Rebuff. I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
If he had them both, he would have gotten a spell for his trouble. Jace scries another land to the bottom, then draws for Jacob. It's going to be Negate. Not horrible, but it's a little late for that kind of effect. 3 counter spells in Baugh's hand. I don't think that's helping anyone.
His hand is made up of the stuff that makes sense for the role he's supposed to play in the match, but in this game, that is not what he needs to be drawing.
So we go back to Brian. He still has not found his Eldrazi, but he might not need it. 1 minute, 40 seconds remain. Brian is at 9 to Jacob's 12. Liliana starts out by shrinking Thraben Inspector down to a 0-1. And then we are looking at an attack. Both creatures attack. Are they at Jacob? Are they at Jace? The 0-1 jumps in front of the Ishkana. Jace down to 4. Another Grim Flayer for Brian. There's not enough mana. Jacob still cannot counter anything. Smuggler's Copter the draw. That's no help. A plus from Jace. Scry at the bottom. Draw. But what can he have? Okay, Archangel Avacyn. That might be his best draw left.
Yep, that gets to eat a Grim Flayer for free in combat, assuming Brian doesn't have anything, but I believe he's still on that Grasp of Darkness.
Smuggler's Copter for Jacob. Well, at the very least, I mean, that's going to make Jacob's Negate live at
True.
least.
Yeah, I suppose he has all these counter spells that haven't been doing anything, huh?
I mean, they're still questionable if they're going to do anything. Brian has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 12. He has this 13th land in hand, and don't forget that matters. When you get to 14, Ishkana can double activate. All right, so a full attack here from Brian. It's going to be an Avacyn from Jacob. And Brian will try to grasp, but negate is at the ready. So now the creatures will be indestructible. If it were in a different world, he might have activated Copter and made it indestructible.
Yeah, against two 4/4s and a 3/5, not the most effective line, but yeah, in other combat situations, it's often a play.
7 damage comes across. And Emrakul has finally been found for Brian Braun-Duin. He has Jacob at 4 and can put the Eldrazi on top of his deck. 5 card types in the graveyard and 1 million lands in play. 13 lands in play. He cannot yet, will recount the graveyard. If he has a 6th card type, he can play around both counter spells. We thought these lands wouldn't matter, but they might. And actually, Brian's just going to bin all 3. He does not keep... Okay, he wants the Emrakul now. So Liliana, -2, gets Emrakul back. Why wait when you can have it today? And there actually is not enough mana in play for Jacob to cast all his counter spells. Okay.
Yeah, he only has 4 lands up. Costs 5 to rebuff and shrivel. Brian has 4 lands up.
Oh, and it's that's so close. Jacob just counting. Okay, 3 off the Thraben Inspector. 5 more off the Avacyn too. Yeah, this is what happened. The mana's correct.
So you want some more bad news? Brian can use Jacob's Jace to bounce Brian's Ishkana and just cast it and activate it for lethal on its own.
Ew. That's all in one turn.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's no good.
Or
this is time.
He can also use the Jace to bounce the Avacyn and cast it into some counter spells. Not that those really matter.
No, yeah, he's got some counter spells, but they don't counter it. This is turn 1. Jacob draws Spell Queller.
Okay, so now Brian gets to cast a Spell Queller, point both counter spells at it, not pay for either.
Yeah, that seems solid.
Run the Avacyn into the Emrakul.
Okay.
Use the Jace to bounce the Ishkana.
Yeah, I like all these things. Okay, Avacyn swings. She's crewing the Smuggler's Copter.
Okay, that's interesting.
And then Jace will unsummon the Avacyn. Oh, okay, we're going to counter the Avacyn. I could get behind that. Let's just kill everything.
Yeah.
This is better. Then we get the Copter too.
Just cast the stuff, counter both of those things, kill the Copter.
Oh, we don't even have to counter it. We can discard it to the Smuggler's Copter.
Yep, can do that too.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and then the thing about the Jace bouncing the Ishkana, it's not something Brian needs to do. The Emrakul is just lethal.
Attacks, all right. He's going to draw and discard. Yeah, draws Island, discards Avacyn. Blocks. Cast Spell Queller. Counters it, doesn't pay.
Throw all those cards in your graveyard.
No, the Spell Queller is exiled from Spell Shrivel.
He could choose to counter it to their buff.
And did Jacob draw the out? I don't know what the out would look like.
Yeah. No Fumigates in this deck.
Turn number 2. This is Jacob's second turn.
Giving it a once-over, see if there's any way he can leverage the Jace. Is there a card that he can draw into? Can he bounce a creature and survive? You know, theoretically, if he can get the Flare and the Emrakul off the table, he doesn't die.
If the Quarantine Field is in, he boarded that in, that would be an out here.
Sort of a funny thing happens if Jacob is able to survive this turn and he can, and Brian cast Emrakul on his turn 3. Turns 4 and 5 will both be Jacob's.
The David Inspector drew a land, and Avison. That will not do it. Braun-Duin picks up the win in turns. He improves to 6-1. That locks him for day 2. For Jake